Hello, so today we're going to continue the POI like place of interest feature that we were adding. We're actually going to make it better in the sense that it's not just going to show up as soon as you click on the map anywhere. It's going to actually require you to click. So basically, when you click here, you see there's a set home here, set estimator origin, lat lon. We're going to add like a menu here for it. And we're also going to make the places of interest more user-friendly in the sense that if you click on them, you'll actually get a pop-up that shows information about them. And let's add the ability to delete them as well in that pop-up. So first things first, as you can see, I actually deleted the old code or some of it relating to like the UI side of it, just because we're not going to be using it anymore. So yeah, like let's actually first add the menu here. So as you can see, there's this set home here. Let's just look that up to find where the menu is created. I already did this in advance. It's right here in Fly View Map. So let me actually view. Actually, I was going to zoom this in, but never mind. So basically, that pop-up is part of, or that I wouldn't call it a pop-up, maybe like a modal or something like that. It's a part of this component here, and I never talked about QML components, but they're basically like objects that encapsulate like QML stuff. So like it allows you to create like reusable elements that you can create and destroy easily, rather than having an element hard coded in. You have this that you can create and destroy. So basically, is kind of useful for like more advanced use cases, like creating like this, where you easily create and destroy objects depending on where you click. That's the best way I can describe it. So we're going to actually be using it in the future when we create our own pop-up, but I just wanted to show this real quick because we're going to add something to it. So just to show you like where this is created, there's this on map click, on map clicked signal that the flight map actually emits when you click on it, and it has a position tied to it. The position is set to this qt.point, and then set to this like route map to item. I don't actually know what's going on here. I haven't looked too deep into it, but the thing that is important is this drop panel that's created. So it's like var drop panel, and then basically it calls this create object function on the component, which you can do with components. Ties it to the main window. Main window is like the main root window. And then it sets certain variables in it. So this is map click chord, and that's tied to the click chord, which comes from this position. And then there's this click rect as well. So if we go back to the component, as you can see, there's this map click chord, which is what was tied to click chord. Don't actually know where the click rect is, but that's fine. So yeah, we don't really have to care about what's going on in here. All we have to really care about is the fact that there's a drop panel, which has a column, which has a bunch of these buttons, which are like directly tied to what we were seeing. Obviously, like some of these you're not seeing right now because there's this visible property that basically makes it so that some of these show under certain conditions. But we did see the set home here, so we know that this basically is the same thing as when you click on here and this pops up. So let's add our own item to this drop panel. And it's going to be a little simpler than these because we really don't have a condition that we want these to be visible. We just want it to always be visible and always have the ability to add a place of interest. So let's just add one at the bottom. QGC button. Let's turn off GitHub Copilot because it's annoying and it's not really useful for a tutorial. But yeah, you know what? Instead of typing things out, I'm just going to copy paste because I'm lazy. We're just going to set the text to add place of interest. We're going to remove this visible property because we want it to always be visible. And yeah, this on clicked, let's just keep this empty for now. because I want to change some of the way that we're doing this. I actually constructed this in advance, but I'll show what I did there. But yeah, I'm planning out like the best way to do this, and in my opinion, I think that what we're doing right now is a little bit simple in the sense that we just have, like, what we're storing is simply coordinates. I would like to store actually objects of the places of interest so that we can add more stuff to them. So what's a good way to do that? Well, first of all, we're going to actually have to make a new type called POI. And yeah, I didn't add it to the CMake list yet, so it wasn't actually compiling. But yeah, so basically, let's just poi.cc, poi.h. For reference, if we look at our file manager right here, I added these files here. Just to save on time. They're very generic. So like you may ask, like, why create like these separate objects for each like place of interest? That's a good question. I think it's a good way to like have them referenceable in our component easier, rather than like referencing by index of the list. And it allows us to eventually add more data to each place of interest rather than just the coordinate. My plan in the future is maybe like we'll add like a, you know, image to it, or like a name description, you know, like when you have a place of interest, logically, like you're not just going to want to care about having a coordinate attached to it. So that's why I did it the way I did. So if we look at this place of interest that I added, I have this property here for coordinate, which basically we have to still change the manager, but basically like would be like the equivalent of what was stored in this list, except this is just an individual place of interest. So we have to actually store a list of individual places of interest, which we haven't done yet. So yeah, this is just the coordinate of the place of interest, and it's accessible via QProperty, which I've already described before. There's this coordinate here, set coordinate. We have a signal for when the coordinate changes, which we actually don't use, but you know, in the future, if you wanted to make it so that you can change the coordinate of a place of interest, you would use this. I also don't think we're going to be using set coordinate as well, but that's fine, because in the constructor we actually allow you to define the coordinate. I don't think I actually explained this in the previous videos, but when you construct a QObject in the constructor, there's this QObject parent equals a null pointer, and this, like when I first started Qt, this confused me because I was like, why do you have to add this parent to a QObject? What does it accomplish? Basically, when you're constructing a QObject, you can reference the QObject that you constructed the object from. Like, so basically, like you can call POI, give the coordinate, and then put a this there. And what that does essentially is it lets you go through Qt's automated constructing or automated destructing of classes when the parent class gets destructed. So it basically makes it so you don't have to manually like destruct instances of this when the parent class dies. It basically like lets Qt handle it for you. So it's quite useful. We'll see that later. But yes, if we go to poi.cc, as you can see, I defined set coordinate here. Pretty simple. So if the coordinate's not the same, then we set it and we emit the coordinates change. We never actually use this, but it's here just in case we need to use it in the future. In the constructor here, we set coordinate based on what you put it in the constructor. So that's pretty simple stuff. And yeah, gonna pause real quick and drink some water, and I'll get back to you on modifying the POI manager. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, first step in modifying this, I would say, is let's change the way that we're doing this list. So actually, let's actually first import POI.h. I guess I didn't turn off Copilot for .h files. Okay, so importing POI.h, and let's change the way that we're doing this list. One thing I described in the video before, but we didn't actually end up using because of how simple our list was the QML object list model, which inherits from QAbstract list model. I described it before, but basically it stores an abstract list of objects or items. And what this essentially does for you is it allows you to use a list of objects in QML, because QML is kind of picky about the types of objects, and you need to use like a QAbstract list or a QVariant list to actually have lists of items or of objects in QML. It's a little bit like confusing, to be honest, but that's just the way that things are done in Qt. And in QGroundControl, at least, whenever we have a list of objects, we use this QML object list model, which was defined before, and it just like handles a lot of the fun stuff with adding and removing from lists. Basically, it abstracts away a lot of the pain of adding stuff in lists in Qt and having them appear and update in the UI front end. So that's really fun. So let's actually include QML object list model. And actually, we don't have to include POI.h yet. And yeah, let's instead of having this Q list of Q geo coordinates, oops. I always get worse at typing whenever I'm being recorded, but yeah. So let's make this QML object list model pointer, POI list equals null pointer. And yeah, we can actually remove this signal because QML object list model automatically handles like the notifying of the front end whenever things change. So that's kind of useful as well. You don't have to do like manual like signaling or anything. Let's change our property as well. So let's make this const. Yeah, and we'll define this as constant. I believe the reason is because it's a pointer, and because since it's a QML object list model, the front end should automatically update whenever we add or remove stuff to it. I think that's the reason, at least. But yeah, let's change the way we're adding coordinates as well. So I'm actually going to modify this a bit, because I think instead of doing like a normal QGeo coordinate chord, it's better to do const QGeo coordinate chord, just reference it rather than, yeah. Oh yeah, and I also I want to add, like I mentioned, I wanted to add the ability to remove coordinates as well. So let's create a function for that as well. And something I'm doing, rather than referencing the POI type here in this remove POI, in this remove POI function, is I'm referencing just a generic Q object, which we'll see why that's useful soon. But just to describe it, essentially, like this is going to be called, this is QInvocable, it's going to be called by, like, from the front end, and the front end doesn't know what type the object is. So it's just going to send a generic object. It's our job to turn that into the object that we need it to be. So, and also, you know, QML object list model, which is what we're going to be referencing, just contains generic, like generic Q objects as well. So that's why. Let's change this. So let's remove it actually. So we're just returning an instance of the list here. And I think that's basically it here. We just now need to define these classes, which, yeah, let me open up the actual other file here. So first things first, let's include poi.h here. And I believe, you know, something I also want to do is create a constructor here. So something we didn't do before, but I think it's, I like creating constructors for my classes, so just in case we need it. It's not necessary, but I think we should. And yeah, let's just define our constructor here. And one thing, since we declared this as a pointer, we're gonna have to call it, actually initialize it. So we could do this like somewhere outside our constructor if we want to, like, but I think in this instance it's best, or in this use case it's best to just do it in the constructor. So and one thing of note is that we declared QML object list model with this, or we actually construct it and pass in this, which would be like reference to, you know, the POI manager class. And the reason we do that is, as I described before, a lot of things in Qt, you know, like Q objects and stuff like that, they have this Q object parents. And when we reference this QML object list model with this, that basically means that when this POI manager gets killed or destroyed, this list will also get destroyed automatically. So it basically like handles the destructing for you. So that's pretty nice. Just to check, when we actually declare POI manager, did we do that? Did we do that? Because we should. Oh, I think I deleted the code that actually creates an instance of POI manager, so I'll do that soon. Yeah, because I haven't actually worked on this in a while, and some of the code was lost to time, so that's fun. Next step will be actually like defining these add coordinate and remove POI. So something I do usually is I just copy paste so I don't have to type because I'm lazy. And yeah, it's the fun stuff. Okay, so adding coordinate is pretty easy. And if we look at the QML object list model, there's this append, which you can append an object to. So let's just do that. Well, yeah, because, oh yeah. We're actually gonna append a new instance of POI like this. So basically, we're basically creating the new object while we're appending it, or creating the new object and then appending it to the list. So it's pretty straightforward, I think. And I believe that's all we need to do for add coordinate. Like I said before, we don't have to really emit anything when we add stuff to QML object list models. The UI will automatically update. I don't know why this is like partially white and green. That's weird. Yeah, so now for the removal part, let's just declare a POI item. And there's a special thing in Qt called QObjectCast. And it lets you cast a generic QObject to a declared object. And it's safer to use than like a normal like static cast, or I think there's some other cast types, but the Qt way of doing it is more safe because it doesn't crash your program if it doesn't cast properly. Instead, it'll just give you like a null item or null pointer. So that's nice in the sense that it makes your code less crash prone. But what that means is that if it turns out to not be the right type or not cast properly, you need to actually have safety checks. So we do like if POI item, then let's remove. So POI list. Let's check what the removal process is. So there's a remove at, which you put in an index, and remove one, which you put in an object. Since we actually have an object, let's use the remove one. So remove one and then POI item. And yeah, I think that's basically it with this. I'm a little concerned because I see the coloring of this of this file, like randomly this is like not being colored, but I think that might just be a visual bug. And yeah, I'm gonna actually add back the creation of POI manager because I accidentally deleted that, and I don't want to bore you with stuff that's already been done before. So give me 1 second. Okay, so I added back the code that actually like created the POI manager. I realized that in newer QGroundControl, I forgot this, but like things are like POI manager, since it's a singleton, it's actually created with QApplication static. So this basically handles all of the like creation of it and everything, but it is still like defined in other areas so that we can reference it, like in the forgot QGroundControl QML global. It's referenced here. Like basically, I just added everything that we had before. Now when we go into QGroundControl, just to show what we have so far, if we click around, you see this add place of interest. When we click on it, nothing happens, of course, because we haven't added the UI for it yet. And we are going to have to like kind of do a little bit of different stuff from what we had before. That's fine. And yeah, let's start adding the UI. So previously we actually did it in flightmap.qml, but I think since we actually have this add place of interest in flyviewmap.qml, why not just add it there as well? So first of all, let's actually, I don't think, since we're doing the UI from the ground up, let's actually reference the POI manager. So property our POI manager. Basically the same as before for this. So that's fine. Now we have a defined variable for POI manager. And yeah, let's actually make it so that when you press the when you press this add place of interest, it does something. So let's just do POI manager that add coordinate. Let's see what. Oh yeah, we just have it taken a coordinate, an actual just chord. So there's this map click chord, I see. So let's just use that. And yeah, I think that's all we need for that. So now when we click on this, it should add a coordinate and call that function. And yeah, next thing I want to actually do is like add the UI for it so that, you know, it actually shows the points as before, but we're gonna like slightly modify it so that when you click on it, like you can click on it and a pop-up shows up. But yeah, I'm gonna build this and just make sure that this works first. So give me 1 second. Cool, so I built it. I like clicked on the button and no error popped up, so it is properly calling this. That's nice. So let's actually add our map item, kind of similar to the way we did it before. So map item view. Let's call it POI points. Forgot what. Oh yeah, POI list. Okay, so the model will be POI manager.POI list. And then we need to have a delegate for this map item view. So for each item in the POI list, we do what? And what we should do is add a map quick item, just like before. Coordinate should be object.coordinate. As you can see, instead of, I believe before we were referencing model item or something like that, or model something. But since we're actually referencing an object this time, like a list of objects, we would do object.coordinate instead of model list.coordinate. Or no, model data. Yeah. So if you have like a list of coordinate, or like a list of coordinates, like a queue list, you would do model data. But since we have a list of objects, we just reference objects.coordinate. It's kind of confusing, and something I don't like about QML. I mean, there are a lot of things I don't like about it, but that's one of them. It's just confusing. But yeah, for each map quick item, we have a source item. So we'll just do a rectangle as before. For width, we'll just do screen tools. Let's see. Let's make it ×2. Height will be the same as width. Radius, we'll make it a circle, so width divided by 2. Color. So I want to do something special with color where when you press it, it actually turns yellow. So for now, let's just keep this to red. Z. Same as how we did it before. We'll have a border. I used to have it so the border was 1 or 2 pixels, but I think 1 pixel looks a little better. And yeah, so we made the rectangle, and I don't really want to test it because it'll take too long, so let's just add the mouse area first. So this mouse area, basically, you know, when you click on it, something happens. We'll just call it POI mouse area. And if we just left it like this, it would not work because, you know, there's no size associated with it or anything like that. But we're just going to size it based on anchors. So we just do an anchors.fill parents. And that basically just means the mouse area will fill up the space of the parent item. So this will just go on top of the entire parent item. It's useful for mouse areas in a lot of cases. So we'll set the Z again. Probably don't need to do this, but just in case, we'll set the Z to one above what the the actual rectangle is. And mouse areas have, let me actually pull up the documentation of mouse areas. So 1 second. Okay, just to show, the mouse areas have a lot of different signals. So they are canceled, click, double clicked, entered, exited, position change, press and hold, a lot of stuff. Simplest is clicked, which just means you press down and press back up. So press and release. So on clicked, what do we want to do? Well, let's first just print to the output that we actually clicked. So POI clicked at plus object dot coordinate. Just as a method of debugging for us, we can remove this later if we want to, just to verify our code is actually working. And now we actually don't have anything else that we can do yet, because we haven't created that pop-up we wanted to create. But let's say that we want to make this color turn like yellow when we click it on it. We can either do that on the onClicked, but what I prefer, which is actually the better way to do it, is if you have a property that you want to conditionally change, you should define it in the property itself. Because just as an example, let's say I make this color red, and then we do onClicked. Or onClicked, we just like say color parents.color equals black. This is a very simple example, but basically, and like if we had more like complex logic here, this would completely override it. So what I like to do, which I think is more readable, is we just define that conditional logic here. So POI mouse area dot pressed, which is a bool, and it is, you can find it here. This pressed bool just holds if it's, basically holds info if the mouse area is pressed or not. If it's pressed, so we do this basically similar to how you normally do it in JavaScript. I think JavaScript does this, but C++ does this definitely. But like the question mark, if it is pressed, then what do we do? We'll say the color is yellow if it's pressed, right? And then this colon signifies if it's not, if the this bool is false, then we set it to red. So that does it, and you don't have to do anything complex. It's pretty simple. And you could do this with any of these properties. Like, I don't really see a use for it. Maybe if you wanted to change the border color, if it's pressed too, you could do that. But like, there's, you know, QML has a lot of different things you can do related to conditionally defining stuff like that. One thing I recommend though is if you have like a really complex conditional, like let's say your color is dependent on like 4 different things to be true and it has a lot of different cases, then you should actually define a property that has that, because it makes it more readable. And then you define like certain things in that conditional as properties as well, just to make things less of a headache to read for other developers who like decide to look in, or you in 2 months from now. I've learned this from experience. So let me just compile this real quick and let's see what the result is. Okay, so I compiled it, and like I can add a place of interest. It shows up, and I click on it, and it flashes yellow. One thing I did not do was make it so that this closes when I add a place of interest, which is something that's done for everything else. So let's quickly do that. That should be pretty simple to do. Let's just go back to the code, and yeah, you see how everything else does this map click drop panel.close. Let's just do the same thing here. And let me compile that, and I'll show you the output after it compiles. Okay, I already tested this a little bit because I was so eager to test it that I forgot to start recording. But yeah, now as you can see, as soon as I click it, that little like pop-up thing goes away, so that's good. And when we click it, nothing happens yet, expected, but it does turn yellow, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, like as you can see, things look as they should. Yeah, so next let's actually have it so that it creates a pop-up when we click on this. So how do we do that? Well, let's just go back to the area we actually defined the map item view. So map item view, there it is. And right above it, let's just create a components. Because this is how pop-ups are created in other areas of QGroundControl as well, through components, because they are easy objects that you can create and destroy, like I described before. So if you wanted to see how pop-ups are created in other areas, you just do QGC pop-up components, or QGC pop-up dialog, I mean. So like, as an example, this is a pop-up component, and as you can see, it's just a component with a QGC pop-up dialog inside of it. And yeah, like it just has a column and like has all the like, you know, basically usually they have columns, and whatever you need to be inside of it is inside here. This is a very simple pop-up right here, but there are more advanced ones. And since it's a QGC defined type, you can see where it's defined here. Just like other things, QGC has their own way of doing things, and they abstract over existing QML types, which makes it so that a lot of their stuff is reusable and less like repeating code. So this is just inherits from QGC pop-up dialog inherits from a pop-up, and it is really complex. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. It's like very large. So you don't have to like look through it if you don't want to, because there's like plenty of examples throughout QGC on how to use it. But I was just mentioning it as reference because, you know, as a developer, you're not going to know everything. And, you know, if you're going into some project and like you don't know how to do stuff, one of the best ways to see how to do stuff is either through their documentation or just by looking at their code. And it's a nice thing to just go through and see how things are done, so that it's easier for yourself. So now that that's out of the way, let's actually create our pop-up. So QGC pop-up dialog. And let's see what's here. There's a title property, and that's kind of important. That shows the actual title that shows at the very top of the pop-up. So let's set that. And we'll set it to a QString place of interest. You technically don't have to do this QString thing, I don't think, but if you ever wanted to like append something dynamically onto this, like you do like something like this, and then you do .arg, but we're not doing that. So place of interest, and then one thing about components, which might be confusing, is that you might think that you can just access things outside of the component easily and that should work, but that's not true, because components are like their own objects that are created and are completely like encapsulated. So you can't just reference stuff on the outside of this component. It won't work. Like the component where this thing is created is actually not in this area of the code. It's like its own thing. So given that information, you can't just use the POI manager that we defined elsewhere. We'd have to define it again, which is fine. So property, and then POI manager. It's a little bit annoying, but you know, it's fine. So we declared the POI manager again. You could technically just reference this QGroundControl.POI manager directly if you wanted to, but I think it's better. It's more readable often to just declare these as variables at the top of things, because it is less typing a lot of times too. And you know, if this changes, you don't have to go through and find every instance of QGroundControl.POI manager in the code. You just change this top thing. So it's just better coding practices. And since this pop-up is relating to a POI object, like an individual one, right now let's just do var POI object. And that's just going to be a generic like object that right now doesn't equate to anything, which is fine. So let's actually create a column and see how it's done elsewhere. Yeah, I'm just, you can create a column layout if you want things to look a little better, but since this is a simple example, I'm just going to use a normal column. And I'm just going to copy paste this because I am lazy. And yeah, I mean, if I wanted to, I could change this stuff. This is just the width of the column, obviously. This is the spacing between each item. Yeah, and let's just create a label first. I want to actually just tell the user where this point of interest is. So yeah, let's just create some anchors since it's a normal column. I actually don't like using columns. I like using column layouts way better, but whatever. Because with column layout, you don't actually have to define anchors. They just automatically, you just base it on like layout alignments. So it's kind of easier. But let's set the wrap mode of this. And what that does is basically is when the text goes over the amount, it will just create a new line. So it makes it so that the text doesn't just get cut off. It wraps. And then the text. So POI at, actually instead of POI at, let's do place of interest at, and then let's just look at our POI objects. So each one has its own coordinates, right? So POI object dot coordinate dot latitude. So add a comma here and then do the exact same thing for longitude, just to show where it is. Now, to be honest, might not be that useful showing the coordinates, but you know, for this example, let's just do that. And I want to add a button to be able to delete this place of interest. So QGC button. And then let's just add text delete. And then on clicked, I forgot what the function is to delete the place of interest. It is this remove POI, but we have to reference POI manager, not the actual POI itself. So POI manager dot remove POI. Now, the reason we actually reference POI manager is because we want to remove it from the list. It would be nice if I could just reference POI for that, but that's just the way that things are structured right now, is we have to reference POI manager. And what do we reference when we go to remove POI? Oh, just the generic object. Okay, so we just reference POI objects. And you know what? Just for some safety, let's just add this if POI object. I mean, this should never happen, but just in case, if there is no POI object, just return. And that makes it so that we don't try to remove a null object, which would which might cause a crash. If we had better safety mechanisms here, it wouldn't, but still, just good to practice safe coding. And I think that's basically it for the pop-up, except for the fact that we haven't actually created the pop-up yet. We created a component which defines the generic pop-up that we create, but we haven't actually added the mechanism to create the object. And we also, obviously this doesn't equate to anything. It's just a null object. So I'm just gonna create an ID here because I forgot to. You should create an ID for your components. So POI popup dialog component. Let me copy that. And when we actually create the POI here, or when we click on the POI here, we should create an object related to the pop-up. So create objects, and the first element of create object is actually like where the object is getting created on top of. And in almost every scenario that I've done this, you have to do it on main window, which is, I think it's main root. Yeah, it's from main root window. So this is like the top level application window. And the pop-up is getting created on top of this because this is like the like where everything starts in terms of QML. So main window is reference because that's where we're creating the pop-up on top of. And then the next thing that you have to define is the variables, or not the variables and objects that are inside of the component, which there might not be any, but in our case there is. So there's this POI object here, and let me make sure I'm still recording. Yes, I am. Good. Okay, so sometimes I get like paranoid that I'm not recording, but yeah, there's this POI object here, which right now is not assigned to anything. So we need to assign this to something. So we do POI object, and what is that? Like what would be our POI object be? That would just be the objects in this map quick item. So POI object gets set to object. And we created the object, but nothing, if you run this code, nothing will happen because the pop-ups require the open method to actually get opened. So we just do .open. And that should be it. I'm gonna remove the semicolon because it's not needed, but yeah, that should be it. Like after this, the pop-up should open. So I'm going to run the code and see if it actually works. So give me 1 second. Oh, I realized I forgot something. So let's just call a close here to actually close the pop-up after we delete the place of interest, because obviously once you delete it, you don't really care about it anymore. So it makes sense to close the pop-up. And there's a close method in QGC pop-up dialog which lets you just close it. I think, or that's just an element of the parent's pop-up that is being inherited from. So yeah, that should work. Let me compile it again. So 1 sec. Okay, so now I compiled. I'm in QGC. We add a place of interest here, and we click on it. Bam! A pop-up shows up. And you can click OK and close it if you wanted to. This can look better. Like we can change the way things are visible here and like format it nicely, but this will work for now. And if we click the delete button, fades away. So that seems to be working. We can add multiple places of interest and delete anyone we want. And yeah, I think that's all I had planned for this video. So right now, obviously, like this is still pretty simple. Like in a production environment, you'd probably want more features than there's just this, but it's a good start for stuff. Few things that I would add myself is, for one, if you close this app and reopen and all of your places of interest just disappear, right? So if I were to add on to this, I would probably make it so that every time you create a place of interest, it would write to a file, maybe a CSV file that stores all of your places of interest. And then when you open it, it would generate from that. So yeah, there's plenty of stuff you can do to better this, and you can add more information here too. I mean, our class is extremely simple. This POI class here, there's only coordinate really, but if you wanted to, you could add like an image related to it. You can add like basically anything. Hell, I mean, even you can even like make it so that these places of interest generate from something else, like when you like take a photo or something like that. So there's a lot of different things you can do. But yeah, I think for the scope of this video, that is out of scope. Maybe if I decide to make another video, I'll go into writing to a file and actually making it so that these show up when you launch your app immediately. But yeah, I think that's basically it. Feel free to pop any questions down in the comment section if you have any. And yeah, have a nice day.